Mafia fall in love with police. Episode 10. Before starting the episode, like, share, and subscribe. Enable the bell icon, you will get notification for my new video. Seoul Hospital, hallway. A violent crash erupted from the hallway, the sharp, metallic clang of a cart hitting the floor followed by a woman's jagged scream. Jimin and Taehyung snapped their heads toward the door, their hearts racing as the peace of the room was traded for public chaos. They rushed out to find a scene of raw, domestic devastation. A woman stood trembling, her hair disheveled and face flushed with tears, while her husband glared at her with a jaw clenched in cold irritation. "Wife, you ruined my life," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. "Wife, you lied to me." "Husband, stop shouting," the man snapped back, his hand rising in a threatening arc. Jimin didn't hesitate. With a dark shadow crossing his face, he handed the baby to Taehyung without a word. "Jimin, hold the baby," he muttered, stepping into the center of the storm. "Jimin, what exactly is happening here?" Jimin asked, his voice a low, dangerous simmer. "Husband, this is a family issue, don't interfere," the husband spat. Jimin let out a slow, sharp breath. "If it were a family issue, you should have kept it behind your own front door. The moment you brought it into a hospital, it became everyone's business." "Wife," choked on a sob. "He cheated on me, he got another woman pregnant. A woman he calls his enemy." The word pregnant hit Taehyung like a physical blow. He stiffened, his grip on the child tightening. "Husband, it wasn't cheating, I just wanted to teach her a lesson. She deserved punishment," his tone chillingly careless. The hallway went silent, but only for a heartbeat. Crack. Jimin's fist collided with the man's face before anyone could blink. The husband stumbled back, clutching his burning cheek in pure shock. Jimin surged forward, fist twisting into the man's collar. "Jimin, you speak as if it's nothing." Jimin's voice trembled with a fury so deep it was almost a whisper. "Jimin, do you even understand what pregnancy means? It's not a game, it's not a punishment, it is a life." Humiliated, the man tried to swing back, but his arm was caught in midair. Taehyung's hand was a vice around his wrist, his eyes turning to chips of ice. "Taehyung, if so much as your finger touches him," Taehyung said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, sub-zero temperature. "Taehyung, I will break your hand." He twisted the wrist just enough to make the man hiss in agony until the wife pleaded for them to stop. Taehyung released him slowly, his expression unreadable. Jimin stepped back, adjusting his sleeve, his eyes softening as he looked at Taehyung. "Jimin, look at him," Jimin said to the coward, his voice now ringing with a fierce, heartbreaking pride. "Jimin, this is my man. I can say that proudly. He would never act like you." Taehyung's breath hitched. "Jimin, we're letting you go only because of your wife." Jimin finished, unaware of the blood turning to lead in Taehyung's veins. "Jimin, not because you deserve it." As the hospital staff escorted the couple away, a heavy silence returned to the corridor. But for Taehyung, the world was spinning. Closing parenthesis. Taehyung thought Jimin's words which he said he would never act like you. Taehyung swallowed hard, his fingers brushing against his own collar as if he expected to feel the sting of Jimin's hand against his skin. Because deep down, in the darkest corners of his soul, he knew the truth. Jungkook's pregnancy wasn't an accident. If Jimin ever found out, would that pride turn to disgust? For the first time in his life, Taehyung felt a cold, paralyzing sensation. It was fear for himself. 1 week later. A week had passed, and the heavy atmosphere within the house felt as if it were suffocating the very air. Though the physical pain in Hoseok's stomach had subsided, it had been replaced by a haunting, hollow exhaustion. His once vibrant face was now a map of pale skin and bloodless lips, with dark shadows permanently etched beneath his eyes. Every meal became a battlefield. No matter how much yoongi pleaded, Hoseok's body rejected everything, leaving yoongi to stand in the hallway, listening to the agonizing sounds of nausea behind a closed bathroom door. "Sorry I changed the bedroom, I hope you wouldn't mind." Cold sweat smile. Soap's house, bedroom, sleep had become a stranger to Hoseok. Even when his body felt like lead, his mind burned with a restless, loud silence. Yoongi saw it all, the way Hoseok stared at the ceiling, the way his strength seemed to evaporate with every passing hour. "Yoongi, are you sure you are fine?" Yoongi asked softly that morning, his shadow hovering over Hoseok as he adjusted the curtains to shield him from the intrusive sunlight. "Hoseok, I'm fine," Hoseok whispered, though the simple act of sitting on the edge of the bed seemed to drain his entire soul. The sharp ring of a phone sliced through the room. Yoongi's jaw tightened the moment he saw the screen. He stepped away, his voice dropping into a cold, professional tone. Yoongi. Yes, muttered. A pause, and then his expression darkened into something lethal. Yoongi. I'm coming. As he moved to leave, Hoseok's trembling fingers shot out, catching Yoongi's wrist with a desperate, fragile grip. Don't go, Hoseok pleaded. There was no anger, only a raw, naked fear that mirrored the instability of his body. Yoongi closed his eyes, a pained inhale escaping his lungs. I have to, he said, his voice strained with the conflict between his duty and his heart. Our enemies broke into the warehouse. Yoongi looked down at Hoseok, seeing the terrifying fragility of the man he loved. I'll come back soon, I promise. Hoseok's grip lingered for a heartbeat before his hand fell away. Okay. Yoongi hesitated at the threshold, a strange, sickening uneasiness settling in his chest. But the pull of the underworld was relentless. I'll call you, he promised softly before the door clicked shut, leaving Hoseok enveloped in an oppressive silence. Hoseok sat staring at the empty doorway, his vision beginning to blur as a heavy dizziness washed over him. Hoseok. I'm fine, he lied to the empty room, his hand pressing against a forehead that felt too hot and too cold all at once. His body screamed for rest, but his intuition screamed louder. If Yoongi couldn't take him, he would go himself. Forcing himself to stand, he leaned heavily against the furniture, each step a struggle against the black spots dancing in his eyes. The mansion driveway, morning. Hoseok didn't just walk, he marched. Despite the relentless dizziness and the weakness turning his legs to lead, he seized Min-jae by the sleeve and began dragging him toward the car. Min-jae, one of Yoongi's trustable maid. Min-jae panicked instantly, his voice rising in protest. Hung. No, please. Boss Yoongi told us clearly not to let you go anywhere alone. Ignoring the plea, Hoseok forced him toward the driver's seat and opened the passenger door. His eyes were exhausted, yet they held a razor-sharp edge as he spoke one cold command, get in. Hung, if boss finds out. Min-jae swallowed hard, but Hoseok's voice dropped to a dangerously low level. Shut your mouth and do what I say. Min-jae froze. He had witnessed Yoongi's quiet, lethal destruction of men twice his size, but there was something about Hoseok's stillness that felt even more terrifying. When Min-jae tried to plead one last time, Hoseok leaned against the car, one hand pressing subtly against his abdomen as another wave of vertigo passed. Fine, Hoseok said with a haunting calmness. If I die before Yoongi comes back, I'll make sure to tell him you refused to take me to the hospital. Min-jae's blood ran cold. Hung, you can explain to him why I collapsed, Hoseok added lazily. I'm sure he'll understand. Terrified of the implications, Min-jae scrambled into the driver's seat and started the engine. Please don't say things like that. Nothing will happen to you. Then drive. As the car pulled through the mansion gates, the silence was heavy with Min-jae's nervous sweat. He couldn't fathom how Yoongi handled someone so formidable. Hung, Min-jae ventured cautiously, glancing through the rearview mirror. If Boss Yoongi finds out about this, I'm really dead. Hoseok didn't even turn his head. I'll kill him before he kills you. The car almost swerved as Min-jae gasped. Hung. A faint smirk ghosted over Hoseok's pale face. Yoongi can control the entire city if he wants. But he can't control Hoseok. In that moment, Min-jae realized that Hoseok was not just the boss's partner, he was a force of his own, fearless even when broken. But as he looked through the mirror again, his heart dropped. Hoseok had leaned back, his eyes shut and breathing uneven, his hand still resting protectively over his stomach. Hospital outside. The car skidded to a halt in front of the hospital, the engine's hum dying into a heavy, expectant silence. Min-jae scrambled out of the driver's seat, his movements frantic as he rushed to the passenger side. He pulled the door open with a sharp click, his breath visible in the morning air. Hung, we're here, he whispered, his voice trembling with a cocktail of fear and duty. Hoseok opened his eyes with agonizing slowness. For a long moment, he didn't move, his gaze fixed on nothingness. To him, the world felt precariously tilted, as if the very ground beneath the hospital was made of shifting sand. The sterile white building loomed ahead, a monument to the memories he had tried so hard to bury. I'm fine, he murmured. The words felt hollow, sounding like they were coming from someone miles away rather than his own parched throat. As he finally moved to step out, his knees buckled, the strength leaving his body in a sudden, terrifying rush. Gravity seemed to double its weight, pulling him toward the pavement. Careful, Min-jae cried out, his hands shooting forward to catch Hoseok's shoulders before he could hit the ground. Hoseok's breath hitched, his fingers digging into Min-jae's arms for support. "I can walk," he insisted, his voice a ghost of its former authority. He tried to straighten his back, to reclaim the pride that usually defined him. But despite his words, he didn't push Min-jae away. He couldn't. At that moment, the silent support was the only thing keeping the world from spinning into total darkness. Seoul Hospital. Examination room. The heavy door to the examination room clicked shut, sealing out the sterile hum of the hospital hallway. Inside, the walls were a cold, clinical white that seemed to press inward as the doctor entered, her gaze immediately locking onto Hoseok's drawn features. The doctor paused, her pen hovering over his chart as she took in his gaunt appearance. "You look exhausted," she said, her voice dropping into a gentle, concerned tone. "How long have you been feeling like this?" "A week," Hoseok replied, his voice barely a whisper against the silence of the room. "Nausea." He nodded silently, the mere mention of it bringing back the sickly churn in his stomach. "Loss of appetite?" "Yes." "Dizziness?" "Yes," he admitted, his hand instinctively reaching for the edge of the examination table as if to steady himself. The doctor studied his file for a long moment before looking up, her next question cutting through the air like a blade. "When was your last cycle?" The air in the room seemed to freeze. Min-jae, standing near the door, blinked in utter confusion, but for Hoseok, the world slowed to a crawl. His breath hitched, trapped in a chest that suddenly felt too tight. He tried to navigate the fog in his mind, searching for a date, a memory, anything. "It's been late," he managed to choke out. The doctor's expression shifted, a flicker of professional intuition crossing her face. "We'll run blood tests," she said with a calm finality. "Just to be sure." Waiting area. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as the silence in the waiting area stretched, becoming almost unbearable. Min-jae shifted in his seat, his eyes darting toward Hoseok with mounting concern. "Hung, are you okay?" Min-jae asked softly. Hoseok didn't answer, his voice seemed to have vanished along with his composure. Within the quiet of his own mind, he was already connecting the jagged pieces of a truth he wasn't ready to face, the persistent nausea, the sudden weakness, and the cycle that had long since missed its mark. His heartbeat began a slow, frantic climb against his ribs. No, not again. The memories flooded back, unbidden and sharp. He was back at the hospital, smelling the blood, hearing the echo of the screaming, and feeling the suffocating weight of the blame. Long before this moment, a doctor had delivered a warning that now felt like a curse. His body had endured such severe trauma from the first miscarriage that any future pregnancy would be classified as high risk. He had been told he would need to be extremely careful. He had nodded back then, a silent promise to protect himself. But he hadn't planned for this, not now, and not while the world around them was already falling apart. Doctor examination room. The door clicked shut with a finality that seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. The doctor stepped back inside, her movements measured and heavy with a truth that was about to shatter the world. "Mr. Jung Hoseok," she began, her voice carefully steady. "The test results are positive." Silence, vast, cold, and suffocating, filled the space between them. "You're pregnant." Min-jae's mouth fell open, his breath hitching in his throat. But Hoseok didn't move, he didn't scream, he didn't cry, he simply sat there, his gaze fixed on the doctor as if he were staring into the heart of a storm he had already survived once before. "What?" he whispered, the word barely a ghost of a sound. "You're in the early stage," she continued, her tone softening into a gentle, clinical pity. "But I need to speak honestly with you." Hoseok felt the world tilt. His fingers slowly tightened around the cold metal edge of the hospital bed, his knuckles turning white. "Given your previous miscarriage and the condition of your uterus, this pregnancy is automatically classified as high risk." The room felt smaller, the white walls pressing in on him. "And that's not all," she added, her eyes searching his pale face. "Are you sleeping properly?" Hoseok let out a dry, humorless sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Sleeping? How many hours per night?" He hesitated. The truth felt like a confession of a crime. He hadn't slept properly in 2.5 years, not since the night the world turned to ash. Not since he killed her. Not since he sat beside her cold body for 3 days straight, trapped in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Sleep had abandoned him that night, and it had never come back. 2 hours, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Sometimes none. Min-jae turned sharply, horror etched into his features. "Hung." The doctor's face hardened into a mask of professional concern. "That is extremely dangerous." Chronic sleep deprivation for that long weakens your immune system, destabilizes blood pressure, and increases miscarriage risk significantly. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Your body is already fragile. Continuing this pregnancy without strict medical supervision and proper rest could lead to premature bleeding, collapse, or another miscarriage. Another miscarriage. The words didn't cut him. They hollowed him out, leaving nothing but a cold, empty ache where hope should have been. And if I terminate it? Hoseok asked quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. The doctor exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping. Because of your previous trauma, termination is also risky. There is a chance of internal bleeding. It's not a safe option either. There it was. The impossible choice. To continue was a risk. To abort was a risk. There was no safe road back to the life he knew. After everything he had done, after everything he had lost, life was offering him another fragile heartbeat, and it felt like a death sentence. When the doctor finally left to arrange for further monitoring, the silence that swallowed the room was deafening. Min-jae looked shaken to his core. Hung, boss needs to know. Hoseok's eyes slowly lifted, the darkness in them making Min-jae freeze. No, this isn't small. If boss finds out I hid something like this. I'm not hiding it, Hoseok interrupted, his voice a calm, steady blade. His hand moved with a haunting gentleness to rest over his stomach. Life. Again, I'll tell him. When, a faint, unreadable smile touched Hoseok's bloodless lips. Properly, Min-jae frowned, his confusion turning into a desperate hope. Properly, I'll surprise him. Surprise. Min-jae wanted to believe it. But Hoseok remembered the first time. He remembered the blood, the blame, and the way Yoongi had nearly destroyed the world in his rage and guilt. This didn't feel like a surprise, it felt like a ticking bomb. But Hoseok's gaze remained steady, his resolve as cold as ice. Don't tell Yoongi, he said softly, the command echoing in the small room. Promise me. Min-jae hesitated, the weight of the secret pressing down on him, before finally nodding slowly. Okay, Hung. Min-jae believed it was a surprise, a chance for a new beginning. But as Hoseok sat in the clinical light, he knew the truth. This wasn't excitement, this was pure, unadulterated fear. Because deep down, he wasn't sure if his broken body could survive another loss, and he was certain Yoongi wouldn't survive losing him. The door to the examination room had long since closed, but the words whispered inside continued to echo, louder than the clinical hum of the hospital. Hoseok remained seated on the edge of the bed, his knuckles white as he gripped the thin, paper-covered mattress. One hand rested over his abdomen, not in comfort, but in a desperate, instinctive shield. Pregnant. Again. High risk. No safe choice. Every thought was a jagged shard of glass cutting through his mind. His chest felt so tight he was certain he had forgotten how to breathe. I need some air, he said, his voice barely a thread in the silent room. Hung, you should rest, Min-jae started, his eyes wide with a frantic sort of worry. I'm not collapsing, Hoseok replied. His tone was eerily calm, the kind of calm that precedes a total wreckage. He ignored the way his legs trembled as he forced them to meet the floor. His body felt like a traitor, ready to betray him at any second, but he pushed forward. Min-jae hesitated, then sighed, offering a steadying arm as he helped him step out of the room. Seoul Hospital, waiting area. The hospital waiting area stretched out before them, a long, agonizing tunnel of white. It was too bright, the fluorescent lights burning into his retinas. It was too clean, smelling of death masked by chemicals. It was too quiet, save for the rhythmic thud of his own heart. Hoseok walked slowly, his boots clicking softly against the polished linoleum. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself had turned to lead. As they turned the corner, the world stopped. Hoseok froze mid-stride. Min-jae, caught off guard, stumbled and almost bumped into his back. Hung, Min-jae whispered, confused, but Hoseok wasn't listening. He couldn't hear anything over the sudden roar of blood in his ears. A few meters ahead, the hallway felt narrower. Jimin was walking there, his movements cautious and tender. One arm was wrapped protectively around the person beside him, guiding them with a devotion that was painful to witness. That person was Jungkook. To be continued.